YouTube. It's been a while. Thanks for bearing with me. There's been a lot going on. I got some new stars. Stars are pretty cool. Today I want to talk about Millicent Garrett Fawcett. She was the leader of the biggest suffrage society in the UK, the NUWSS, the National Union of Women's Suffrage Societies. When her statue was unveiled in April, it made national headlines because, although there are a lot of statues in Parliament Square, hers is the first of a woman. Now, this statue was put up in April, so I'm aware I'm quite far behind the curve with this one, but with all the publicity around her, I didn't think I had anything particularly new to say until I remembered a speech that she made in 1872 that I don't think I've heard anyone else talk about. So here goes. Now, this speech was one of the earliest she gave, and she was quite pragmatic. She realised that there were a lot of arguments being put forward against suffrage, which just means the vote, for women. And she was aware that if women wanted to vote, they would need to overcome these arguments. So she wrote, I'm not even kidding, a listicle. 13 common arguments against women having the vote and why they are wrong. And she didn't give it a good clickbaity title like I did, though. We're going to have a look at them and see what she said about them. Now, I can imagine some of you are saying, why are you bringing this up? There are real people out there who think that women still shouldn't have the vote. Aren't you just giving them extra ammunition? Personally, I love reading about old-timey anti-suffrage stuff. I think it's hilarious, and it's a part of the story I never heard when I was in school. Back in the 1910s, there were anti-suffrage groups, sometimes led by women, who did actual activism and wrote letters and everything. It's so out of step with how we think today that it can seem ludicrous to us, but it wasn't thought ludicrous at the time. These days we take it for granted that women can vote. When we hear anti-suffrage arguments, they seem laughable to us. But as I was reading these, I started to recognise opinions and turns of phrase that I have heard real modern people espousing, although they don't usually have the boldness to say them as outright as they did in 1872. Because women voting seems so natural to us, we don't always have good answers to these arguments. We laugh them off, but we can't seriously engage with them. Millicent had to engage with them seriously because they were mainstream thought at the time. So she is much better at defending her suffrage than I am, and I want to be able to defend it. I don't just want to vote, I want to be able to explain why I should vote. And the other thing is, if you know the historical arguments, then it's much easier to spot the modern ones, which are hidden, they're delivered in covert language, they've been zhuzhed up to make them sound more attractive to a modern audience. And when you can spot them, it's easier to defend yourself against them. So we're going to hear the arguments, and then we're going to hear what Millicent said about them. So without further ado. 1. Women are sufficiently represented already by men, and their interests have always been jealously protected by the legislature. So basically, women don't need the vote. If a woman has an interest, she can ask her father or her husband or her brother to vote on her behalf, and of course, he will take their needs into account. And anyway, isn't the government kind to women already? What would you even do with your vote? Millicent said, men might think they know better than women what's good for them, but women don't agree. In fact, there are injustices that women would like to change. Women would like to keep their property when they marry. Women would like to see their children. Yeah, so after your child hits 7, they can be taken away by your husband, and if he wants, he could never let them see you ever again, and you have no legal recourse. If men are so good at looking after our interests, they would have sorted these things by now. Besides, women pay tax, so why shouldn't they have a say in what the government does with that money? 2. A woman is so easily influenced that if she had a vote, it would practically have the same effect as giving 2 votes to her nearest male relation, or to her favourite clergyman. Millicent said, well, if you're going to give out votes based on who's easily influenced and who's not, I can think of some men who shouldn't have them. There are a lot of people who just parrot whatever they read in the Times. Should we take away their votes? 3. Women are so obstinate that if they had votes, endless family discord would ensue. Basically, if women had votes, it would cause arguments at the dinner table. People don't suddenly acquire political views when they get the votes. Women have views already. Women are already arguing politics at the dinner table. Either they already agree with their husbands, or they don't. And when they get the vote, they're just going to have to muddle along like they always have been doing. 4. The ideal of family life is a miniature despotism. One supreme head, to whom all other members of the family are subject. This ideal would be destroyed if the equality of women with men were recognised by extending the suffrage to women. This is the weirdest one to me, because why would anyone argue for despotism? But I guess they hadn't heard of Hitler or Stalin yet, so it was like a benevolent dictatorship that they were imagining. Basically, this argument says that the man is the head of the family, and if a woman is given the vote, then that will disrupt the natural order. Millicent said, yeah, it will. Good. Men would never accept dictatorship in their government. Why would they tolerate it in domestic life? And men are always banging on about liberty, but can't they extend that to women? There is no argument that you can make for personal freedom that does not include women. And frankly, a dictatorship is not a good way to run a household. 5. Women are intellectually inferior to men. See, these days the instinctive reaction is to say, no, we're not. But actually that's not a very strong argument, because if you say that, then you have already conceded that if women were stupider, then you're right, they shouldn't vote. And then all your opponent needs to do is pull out one rubbish study with IQ levels on it, and boom, you've lost. Millicent, though, she actually doesn't know if women are stupider or not. IQ hasn't been invented yet. She says, even if we are, so what? If it was proved that northerners are stupider than southerners, which some people actually believed back then, would we take away northerners' right to vote? If scientists went to your hometown and proved that people from that area were stupider on average, would you give up your right to vote? Even if women are, on average, not as smart as men, that doesn't mean every woman is stupider than the stupidest man. The bell curves overlap. So the smartest woman in the world is smarter than the stupidest man in the world. Shouldn't she be allowed to vote? Should we take away the stupidest man's right to vote? If we're going to decide votes based on intelligence, I can think of some men who shouldn't get them. 6. The family is woman's proper sphere, and if she entered into politics, she would be withdrawn from domestic duties. Millicent points out, well, not all women have a family to look after. Statistically, there are more women than men, so not every woman is going to be able to pair off and find a husband. But even for women who are married, how much time does it really take to be a voter? How much time do men spend on it? I mean, most men don't spend an hour a week even on being a voter. And there are lots of things that distract women from their domestic duties. Should women be stopped from going to church or going for a walk? Besides, all that stuff that men are doing to make themselves better voters, reading newspapers and learning about political philosophy and going to meetings, all that stuff makes you better at running a house. You can't run a good house. You can't look after a husband and children if you are intellectually stunted. And by the way, this is probably the most popular anti-suffrage argument you see in political cartoons. So scared of having to look after their own damn children. 7. The line must be drawn somewhere, and if women had votes, they would soon be wanting to enter the House of Commons. If women are just naturally rubbish at being MPs, you're not going to need a law banning them from doing it. You don't need to ban someone from doing something it is impossible for them to do. If a constituency wants a woman MP, they should be able to pick one. 8. Women do not want the franchise. Yes, we do. That's why there are so many petitions going to Parliament every year. Any woman who doesn't want to vote, any woman who thinks it's unladylike or improper, doesn't have to. But that's no reason to deny suffrage to those of us who do. 9. Most women are conservatives, and therefore their enfranchisement would have a reactionary effect upon politics. So this was a real worry at the time. You see, in 1872, not all men could vote either. You had to own property. And so, if women were going to get the vote, that would be on the same basis as men, just landowning women. And people who are rich, who have a lot of land, tend to be conservatives. So if you're a Liberal MP, that gives you a fairly strong incentive to ignore the woman's question. These days, people who don't want women to vote will tell you the opposite. They will tell you that women are all bleeding heart liberals who are letting the Muslims in. And this gives you a clue as to what side of the political spectrum these people find themselves on. Millicent said, well, the point of an electorate isn't to be exactly half conservatives and half liberals. If more people are conservatives, then more conservatives should be elected. That's the point of democracy. You can't ban someone from voting just because you don't like their political views. 10. The indulgence and courtesy with which women are now treated by men would cease if women exercised all the rights and privileges of citizenship. Women would therefore, on the whole, be losers if they obtained the franchise. So this one's basically saying, if women get the vote, then we men won't be chivalrous towards you anymore. Millicent said, so let's look at what women get out of chivalry. We get helped out of carriages, we get seats on trains, we get doors open for us, we get served first at dinner. Wouldn't you rather be able to choose your political representatives? I mean, it's a bit more important, isn't it? Besides, we never got the choice. We didn't decide to give up the vote in order to gain chivalry. Men made that decision for us. And would it even happen? Men who have the vote don't get treated more rudely than men who don't. In fact, it's the opposite. People give more deference to people who have power. Besides, were you just being polite because we can't vote this whole time? 11. The keen and intense excitement kindled by political strife would, if shared by women, deteriorate their physical powers and would probably lead to the insanity of considerable numbers of them. This is the one that Millicent admits she finds the weirdest, or as she politely puts it, the most inventive. There are plenty of women who are sick from having nothing to do all day except potter around the house. And besides, women are already allowed to vote on school boards and parish councils. That hasn't led to any major outbreak of sickness or overwork. And even if women do get sick because of overexcitement, that doesn't mean you have to deny the vote to the women who don't. If we're not giving the vote to people who work too hard on political campaigns and get sick, I can think of some men who shouldn't be allowed. If a woman does get sick from overwork surrounding an election, she can decide for herself whether or not to carry on with that work. The last two are kind of the same, so I'm going to do them both at once. 12. The exercise of political power by women is repugnant to the feelings and quite at variance with a due sense of propriety. 13. The notion that women have any claim to representation is so monstrous and absurd that no reasonable being would ever give the subject a moment's serious consideration. Millicent admits that this argument is pretty strong. People in 1872 often just felt that the idea of a woman voting was wrong. It wasn't a feeling that was rooted in reason, just a gut feeling based on not liking new things. But we can't decide things just based on our gut feelings. And we know that people can and do change their minds on female suffrage, so it's not improper by some immutable law of nature. Thankfully, by the time Millicent was giving this speech, the opinion that women's suffrage was just absurd was already dying out. She mentions some prominent, well-regarded supporters of female suffrage like John Stuart Mill and Charles Darwin, seen here posing for his author's inside cover photo, who were helping to make votes for women more respectable. Millicent didn't know it at the time, but it would take 46 more years of campaigning for any woman to be allowed to vote in a general election, let alone vote on the same terms as men. But, as author Constance Peele said, if voting is a fundamental right, then women should never have had to fight for it. We should have always had it. And if it's a natural right, the kind you're born with, then not only should we not have had to fight for it, but it was taken from us by men in power. It was a hard-won fight, and without it we would never have made later gains, like being able to go into all sorts of workplaces that had previously been closed off, being able to get hold of contraception, or being able to become MPs ourselves. Thanks for listening. I'm going to post a link to the whole speech in the description if you want to read it. Also, I have made a Google map with all the locations of London History Show episodes so far. So if you're walking around London and you would like to visit one of these locations, you can actually do that. You can see where they are. So check out the link in the description.